Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us for our first webinar, first time ever on this topic, down payment and financial assistance resources for home buyers. So we get this question all the time here at the My Move DMV team, and we finally are trying to kind of put it together into a package. And what we found pretty quickly was that there is a lot of information out there. So we're going to do the best we can to provide at least an introduction this evening. I'm Katie Wethman. I'm the founder of the My Move DMV team at eXp Realty, and our team, we've been doing this about 17 years now, and our specialty is first-time homebuyers. So we've come across a lot of programs over the years. There's always new ones out there. So we're going to start with a little bit of a welcome here and going over some financing basics. So just basic information about the mortgage process, regardless of what loan program you're using. Then I'm going to shift gears and give you the highlights of about 7 or 8 of our favorite programs. Now, there are literally dozens and dozens. So we obviously can't include all of them on this 1-hour webinar, and they won't all be relevant for everyone anyway. So we just picked some of our favorites to give a cross section of what's available. And what we encourage people to do is then reach out to us, schedule a quick 15 or 20-minute meeting, and we can hear what some of your needs are and try to connect you with the lenders that best match those types of programs. So we'll get to that about halfway through, and then I'm going to round out our hour together with some information about the home buying process in general, just how to get started. You know, once you pick a lender and pick a loan program, then what happens? You know, choosing an agent, how does that process work? Getting started looking at properties, etc. And you'll see this link on the page here, this feedback.mymovedmv.com. And I also have a QR code. So if you have a cell phone handy and that's easier, if you want to take a picture, just click on that QR code. It'll take you right to a feedback form. It would really help us out a lot if you gave us some feedback at the end of this presentation, because this is the first time that we're doing this. And so I'm sure we're going to have a lot of lessons learned and be refining it over time. And we would just love your feedback so that we could make it even better every time we do it. So a little bit about me. I am an accounting and finance undergrad out of JMU. So numbers and loan programs, all of this stuff is right up my alley. I love talking about it. Then I went to Darden. I got a master's in business administration at UVA and did some years in consulting here locally in DC at Deloitte and Corporate Executive Board and Freddie Mac, which is where I learned about the mortgage industry. But now I've been in real estate 18 years, and I have a team of 12, a few of whom are on the call this evening. So they're going to be chiming in at the Q&A. They're going to be helping with the chat. So if you have specific questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And they can help manage that, and we'll come back to those at the end. Our team does about 80 million in real estate sales every year, and we cover the entire DMV. So we do have loan programs for different areas. That's about 125 plus transactions each year, and most of our business is referral and repeat. And then the second biggest source of business is first-time homebuyers that come to these kinds of classes, which is great. We love working with people and helping them anytime, even if the time is not right now. We love to just keep in touch and help you out, help you kind of plan ahead. So sometimes we talk to people that are, a year or more out, and that is perfectly fine. I have our social media handles down at the bottom, My Move DMV on Facebook and Instagram. And then Homebuyer FAQ is a new one we just launched, and we'd love for you to follow us there. We're going to be starting a series where when we find these down payment assistance programs, we highlight at least one each week so that people can kind of see what's out there and get an idea of some of the programs that might work for them. So I encourage you to just give us a follow, both at our team account, My Move DMV, and then one especially for you at Homebuyer FAQ. All right, so I'm going to jump right in with financing and understanding a mortgage loan. So people want to know, like, well, what does this look like when I call a lender? And most lenders start the process exactly the same. They're going to be looking at these 4 things in determining what kind of mortgage is the best for you and what you qualify for. So they are going to ask to pull your credit. They can't really do very much or see what you qualify for without your actual credit score. And credit scores are for lenders are a little bit different than the ones you might see on like Credit Karma or one of those public sites. Those sites give you an indication of where it should be, but nobody actually knows your exact credit score except for the 3 credit bureaus themselves. And so that's who the lender will contact to pull your credit report. And I'll talk a little bit more about credit scores in a minute. They're also going to talk to you about how much equity or down payment you have available. And in some cases, that answer is 0. I need to find a program that helps me with the down payment, which is probably why some of you are on this call tonight. So that's perfectly okay. We just need to find the right lender that has those programs with 0 down. But most lenders can work with home buyers that have 3% or 5%. Definitely 10% is easy. Almost any lender can do that. So it is a myth that you need 20% down. With some of these programs, you don't need anything, but if you have 3% or 5%, that's great. Actually, you probably don't even need a special program. Most lenders can work with you with that down payment. They're also going to want to talk to you about the property type, whether it's a condo or a townhouse or a detached home. And the reason for that is that the interest rates will vary a little bit. Condos interest rates are a little bit more expensive than townhouses or detached homes. So they need to make sure they're qualifying you for the right interest rate and the right payment amount. And then finally, occupancy, whether or not this is going to be an investment property for you or if you're planning to live there, because you're going to get the very best rates if you choose to live in that property. So owner occupants are always the best loans. So we always get a lot of concerned questions about credit, what goes into the credit score and how important it is. It is very, very important, but don't interpret that to mean that you need to have 800 or even 770 or 760. There are loan products out there for lower than average credit. It's just that the better your credit is, the more options you're going to have available to you. But there are entire government agencies like FHA, the Federal Housing Administration, that are there specifically to help people with lower credit scores get into a home. So there are a lot of programs out there, but there are 5 categories of things that make up your credit score. The biggest 2 by far are your payment history, which is just whether or not you make your payments on time. So late payments are obviously not going to look good on your credit report. And then the next biggest is the amount owed. And this one's it gets misunderstood a lot because it's not the absolute amount owed. Like you could owe $10,000 and that's fine. It's $10,000 out of how much credit you have. So if you think of your credit like an ocean of credit, then that amount might be you might owe a small amount out of that ocean available to you. But if you're, instead of an ocean of credit, you have maybe a swimming pool of credit and you owe almost everything in that swimming pool, then that's going to hurt you in going to get a loan. So what they're looking for is the ratio of the amount you owe versus your total credit lines. So most people misunderstand kind of what lenders are looking at there. So if you have a credit card that you never use because the interest rate's too high or something like that, but you have a really high credit limit on that card, don't cancel that card. It will probably bring down your credit score. So similarly, speaking of old credit cards, length of history is worth about 15%, give or take, of your credit score. And that is important because lenders want to know that you've had credit for a long time and that you've managed it for a long time. So if you have a credit card that maybe you got in college and you never use it, you don't even know where it is, don't cancel that card because it's probably your oldest card. And so if you cancel your oldest card, your credit score might go down. And then the last 2 categories are new credit. So how often are you applying for new credit cards? And then the types of credit. Is it student loans or credit card loans or car loans, another mortgage perhaps? So what is the mix of types of credit that you're managing? So a couple tips there. And we do encourage you to let the lender pull your credit up front for a couple of reasons. 1, they can't have an accurate conversation with you without it. 2, sometimes there are mistakes. Even me personally, I consolidated my student loans after college. And when I went to buy my first house, Both the original student loans and the consolidated student loans were both on there. So my debt looked twice as bad as it was. So that was a relatively easy fix, but it took a little bit of time. I had to get a payoff statement. I had to submit documentation to all 3 credit bureaus. So it's fixable. It just took time. So you do want to let them do that. And then even if it's something that we can't necessarily fix or reverse, so let's say you have one late payment on a credit card from 4 years ago, and it's still on there pulling your score down. Sometimes lenders can work with you either through a service that they use or they themselves work with you to contact that lender and ask for forgiveness on that one item. And if you've been good, it was just a one-time thing, you'll usually get that forgiveness and that pulls your credit score up. So then you're going to get a better loan with a better rate. But all of these things take some time. So you do need to be aware of this and work with the lender on your actual credit report that they pull from the services. So once they're talking to you and they're going to figure out, okay, based on these things, your credit score and these other questions, how much down payment you have, let's calculate a monthly payment that you're comfortable with. And that monthly payment is comprised of 3 things and then possibly a couple more depending on your loan. But it's always going to have a principal and interest, which is the loan itself. So that's the same as your student loan or the same as a car loan. So you have to pay for the car itself, but there's also interest on that loan. And the house is the same way. But there are 2 additional things that the lender is going to collect each month. The first is property taxes. So property taxes get paid to the jurisdiction usually twice a year. The lenders want to be able to pay that on your behalf. They don't want you to have to remember to do it or save up to do it. So they're going to collect 1/12 of the property taxes every month, and then they're going to pay the bill when it comes due. And they're going to do the same thing with your insurance. So it's your property insurance, which is sometimes called hazard insurance or homeowners insurance that you normally get through whoever you have your car insurance with, for example. So they're going to, that first year of insurance, you actually pay up front at closing, but then the lender is going to collect 1/12 of that bill every month. And then they're going to pay the bill when it comes due at the end of the year. So those 3 things are covered by the lender and your payment. They're going to help you calculate that. The other things that they'll help you calculate or budget for, but they don't collect it for you necessarily, is private mortgage insurance. So sometimes if you have less than 20% down, sometimes, not always, your loan might have something called private mortgage insurance. And that's an additional fee that it does get rolled into your mortgage payment, but it gets paid to a third party. And then the last thing is condo or HOA or co-op fees. And those get paid separately to the community if there's an association for the house that you're buying. So what type of mortgage should you get? Well, there are a lot of questions that roll up to that big decision. One is how much can you afford monthly? So in your conversation with the lender, they're probably going to help you figure out, okay, this amount of home will equal a payment of X. And then you have to decide, am I comfortable with X? Most people, believe it or not, get approved for far more than they are comfortable paying. So you could afford it, but you might not want to go that high. They are also going to have this conversation with you about a down payment, because that rolls into, well, your monthly payment depends on how much you're borrowing. How much you're borrowing depends on how much of a down payment you have, if any. And then how long do you plan to own the property? And this is important because there are fees when you go to closing. And we're going to talk about this throughout the presentation, but there are fees when you buy and fees when you sell. We want you to be able to recoup those fees over time. So you have to stay in the property long enough for it to have some market appreciation and for you to pay down that loan enough to cover those fees. And generally those fees are going to be around 2.5% to 3% in the DC area. If you're buying outside of DC, Maryland, Virginia, you would need to check with a local realtor there to find out what's common in that area. But I'll talk a little bit about what goes into the fees around here, and you can use that as a guideline for other areas. So how do you pick the right lender? Your agent can certainly help you. We have a list of lenders that we love, who we know are responsible, responsive, have good rates and fees, and then some of these creative loan programs that we're going to be talking about in a few minutes. We strongly prefer people work with local lenders because they do understand the timelines and the local market and what sellers expect, so that we can get you the right house for you. Because it doesn't matter if you have a great loan if you can never find a house and you can never get one at the price you want. So we need a local lender. We need somebody that makes you feel like a priority. Preferably, we want someone that can approve your loan prior to going out house hunting. So we don't want just a pre-approval letter, especially with some of these down payment assistance programs. We really want them to take all of your documentation up front. So not just the credit score, we want them to verify your pay, look at your tax returns, get your bank statements, because some of these programs take a long time. So the more the lender can do up front, the easier it's going to be on everybody and the easier it's going to be to get your offer accepted. And then a big part for people on a call like this one is, does the lender have any special loan programs or special pricing? Is there anything unique about your situation? Is it down payment help you need? Is it closing cost help you need? Maybe you want to buy a fixer-upper, so you need a renovation loan. So these are all the different things. Every lender is different. And that's why we ask people, hey, talk to us and tell us what you're looking for. And then we can look through our list of lenders and say, this one has a great program for renovations. This one has a great no down payment option, and connect you with the right people. You do need a lender that can meet required timelines for some of the contingencies in the area. So in our area, the most common contingencies are appraisal, financing, and then the close date itself. And so we need to know from the lender, how quickly can they do those things? Because if it's, say, a credit union and they need 75 days to close, a seller might not accept that offer. So it doesn't matter if you found a great program and a great interest rate, but if there's some constraint like that we can't get a seller to agree to, it doesn't matter. You won't be able to use that program because the lender can't meet our needs. You do want to find out, how long has that lender been in business? Preferably they've been in business at least 5 years and they've seen a couple of market cycles, and that they have experience with your specific loan program. Reviews would be great. Most loan officers have Zillow reviews or some other reviews that they can send you. And then, are they transparent about these programs and fees and points? Or does it sound like maybe they're kind of dodging and weaving and not giving you a straight answer? Do they provide a full closing cost estimate when you ask for estimates on their fees? Or do they say, oh, that comes later in the process? So you want somebody that's transparent, especially about some of these programs and how they work and what the fees are with them. Okay, any questions on loans? I know that was a really high level overview, but before I get into some specific financial assistance programs, I don't see anything in the chat, so I'll press on unless people have questions, or if you want to drop it into the chat, some of our team members can get back to you. Okay, I'm going to press on then. Let's jump into some of these programs. I need to start with some big picture questions though, so that you understand a little bit more about where these programs are coming from. And the first question is, how much cash does a buyer actually need? And there are a couple of categories of cash that you'll need when you buy. The first is, excuse me, closing costs and fees associated with your purchase. And you should budget about 2.5%, maybe as high as 3.5% of the purchase price, depending on the jurisdiction and depending on the loan program that you have and the lender fees with those programs. The biggest chunks of these closing costs, because well, where does this money go? The biggest chunk of it is transfer taxes, and that's paid to the jurisdiction at closing. And they're generally around 1 to 1.5% in our area. And if you're outside the DMV, I'm sorry, I don't know what all of them are. They can vary very, very widely. But transfer taxes are a big component. The second biggest component is something called title insurance. And that's a one-time insurance policy that you pay for at closing, and it protects you forever in case there's ever a problem with the title to the place that you're buying. So let's say you're buying a condo from a woman who signs everything. She's the owner. You go to closing and it's fine. And 6 months after closing, a guy shows up and says, hey, I'm the ex-husband and I never agreed to sell. Well, that's a big problem for the title because she wasn't entitled to sell it to you. So title insurance covers you with those types of things. And now that's kind of a catastrophic situation that somebody didn't own the actual property, but there are hundreds of smaller things that are much more common title issues. So it could be, for example, somebody refinanced and there was a lien that was never released. So it was paid off, they just didn't go through the paperwork at the courthouse. But to hire an attorney to fix that is thousands of dollars. So title insurance covers all of those things. So it is expensive, but it's a one-time fee at closing. And then the third biggest category is usually the lender fees. And this is why it helps to talk to a couple of different lenders because they're all very different. Some are negotiable, but most of them are not. It's just how they make their money. This also gets tricky when you're trying to compare apples to apples across lenders because some of them have a very low interest rate, but very high fees at closing. And others have a slightly higher interest rate, but very low fees at closing. So we can work with you to look at various estimates and help you compare apples to apples. But usually when one lender appears to be a lot cheaper than the others, there's usually a reason, and it usually has to do with the fees. And then there are miscellaneous other smaller fees at closing, but in general, they all add up to about 2.5% to 3.5%. And a good lender should give you an estimate of those fees at the beginning of the process so that you know how much cash you need to budget for that. On top of that, you need to budget for your down payment, which can be from 0 to 20% or more. And then the last category I've split out, I've called them prepaids. They're expenses paid in advance on your behalf. So they're things you have to pay at closing, but they're not fees in the sense that they just go to somebody else forever. They're prepaid expenses. So the big examples here are homeowners insurance. So your hazard insurance company is going to require that you prepay the first year of insurance at closing. So that's a service that you're paying for. It's not just an expense that's going to your lender. It's just something that you have to pay in advance, but it covers you for the next 12 months. It is prepaid for the next 12 months. Property taxes are another big one. Property taxes, along with condo fees or HOA fees, they get prorated as of the day of closing. So you could either be owing a lot of money upfront, or you could be getting reimbursed money in advance, depending on when the property tax bill gets paid. So for example, let's say the seller already paid the property tax bill that was due in March, and that bill covers March through August. Well, if they already prepaid it for March through August, but they don't own the property anymore, you have to reimburse them for April through August. Similarly, let's say the bill comes in August and it covers the 6 months prior. So you're going to be the owner in 6 months. So you're going to have to pay that August bill, but the seller has to prepay you. So you get a credit towards that property tax bill that's coming in 6 months. So these prepaids could work, some of them could work either way because they get prorated. So the seller might actually be reimbursing you in advance, or you might be reimbursing them for the days that you own the property. I've included those in this 2.5% to 3.5% though. And that's why it's such a big range, because some of these prepaids are hard to predict until we have an actual closing date. So let's talk for a minute about the types of programs that are out there. And this is why it gets to be a very complicated situation with every loan program, assistance program being different. So the first is that they generally fall into 3 categories: down payment help, closing cost help, which are the things we just talked about, or interest rate reductions. So depending on what type of help you're looking for, the lender may or may not have a program for that. Many of these programs are location specific. It could be just DC or just Maryland or just Virginia. It could also be county specific. It could also be census tract specific. So for example, if there's a census tract that's very low income, there might be a special loan program specifically if you're buying in that census tract because they want to encourage homeownership in that low income area. Some of the programs we come across are just first-time homebuyers, and they define that, and they define it differently. So it does get tricky. Some of them is just, maybe you never owned in Virginia before. Some of them might be you've never owned anywhere before. Some of them are you haven't owned in the last 3 years. So you need to get specific about, well, which type of first-time home buyer are you? And then some are just open to all eligible buyers. They're just there to encourage homeownership. So you don't even need to be a first-time buyer. The next category is income restricted and purchase price restricted. So most of these programs did start out as programs that are helping affordability of homes. They're helping low to moderate income buyers afford a home. So many of them are income restricted. A couple you'll come across are also purchase price restricted. Most, and in fact, a lot of them actually do have either a loan limit or a purchase price limit. So you can't go out and buy a $1.2 million home and you're going to get down payment assistance. It's probably just not out there. I won't say never, but it's very unlikely. We do have some great community group programs. A lot of times they're referred to heroes or first responders, veterans. Now, if anybody's a veteran on this call, thank you for your service. But there are 2 different categories of things that can help veterans. One is an actual VA loan through the Veterans Administration, but then many lenders have another veterans program to help with, say, closing costs or something like that. And then we have a couple of great programs that are out there for teachers. And then I should also note with some of these that are profession-based, some you have to be active in that field, others you can be retired in that field and still eligible. And the reason these are all different is that they're sponsored by all different people. And so I've broken some of these next couple of programs out into the sponsor type. So the sponsor could be a specific lender, and only that lender has that program. So they might have done that as part of a community reinvestment program or as part of a marketing blitz that they're doing, but it's only available at that lender. Others are jurisdiction sponsored. So like DC, for example, has DC Open Doors and the HPAP program they are sponsored by the District of Columbia. There are other programs through like Falls Church City or Fairfax County, for example. And then there are government sponsored programs, and these are Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and what they call FLUB, which is the Federal Home Loan Banking System. So Fannie and Freddie are entities, they're quasi-governmental entities that are designed to promote homeownership. So they have special loan programs that fall into some of these categories, but then you can get that program through any lender affiliated with them. So any lender that does Fannie Mae loans can do one of these Fannie programs. Any lender that does Freddie Mac loans can do one of the Freddie programs. Now, often these programs, including Fannie and Freddie, and especially the FHLB loans, they often have limited funds and they're available at certain times of the year. So for example, the pool of funding might open up on March 1st and they will give loans until X amount of dollars runs out, and then it's closed for the rest of the year and they reopen it again the next year. So that's why it's always good to know what these programs are and when that money is available. So if, for example, the FHLB loan ends up being one that's perfect for you, but you talk to a lender and they just ran out of funds, they can look up when does that pool reopen, and then you can time your search so that funds are available for you. So one of the big constraints around most of these is income limits. So this is just an illustration for the DC program. So DC calculates their own median income, and their programs, as an example, is 80% of the median income in DC specifically. And so it's usually a chart that they put out once a year, and it's based on how many people are in your family. So whether 1, 2, 3, etc. So I just put a couple of samples here so that you have an idea of what 80% of the median income looks like. So and a lot of the programs I'm going to go through, they do have this 80% of median income. It won't be exactly this number because this is specifically the Washington, DC number, just to give you an idea. But the lender you're working with can look up specifically whether it's the Arlington median income, or is it the Washington, DC metro area median income, or is it the DC city median income? So every loan program is going to be a little bit different. So again, this is just kind of a buffet of options for you. There we go. All right. So this is the first one I wanted to mention is probably, these first two actually are probably the most well-known ones. So you may have heard of these. This is the Virginia Housing Development Authority. So VHDA loans, and lots of lenders can do a VHDA loan. But the way this works is that it's an FHA loan, which only requires 3.5% down. But then VHDA gives you a 3.5% loan. So you actually have two loans, one for the regular mortgage and then one for the down payment. So the result is that it's 0% down, and you can finance some of the closing costs as well. So you might not need much cash at all if using this program. It's only for primary residences. They do have a household income limit. It's not tied to median income. So I just put in here as an example, this past year, for two people, you have to have a combined income of 162 or less. It's eligible for all first-time home buyers, or if you're a repeat buyer, but it's located in an area of economic opportunity. So this is one of those low income areas that they're trying to promote homeownership. So you can be a repeat buyer if you're in one of those areas. Otherwise, you have to be a first-time home buyer. It does have a sales price limit of $665, and it's only for Virginia. So what I've tried to do on the right here is kind of highlight who it's best for. So this is great for somebody that has no down payment at all saved up, and great for somebody that needs to also finance some closing costs. And then the highlights up here, this falls into the category of down payment and closing cost assistance. It's also location specific because it's just Virginia. And there's a whole website here that you can go see the specifics on that. And by the way, I should have said in the beginning, don't worry about trying to screenshot these or write this stuff down. If you give us the feedback at the link, and I'll have it again at the end, we are happy to send you these slides, which will have the links in them. So you just fill out the feedback, drop in your email address, and we'll make sure we get these to you. Okay, so on the other side of the river, we have a program called the DC Open Doors program, which is also a zero down program. So it's great for people that have no down payment, great for people that are looking in DC. There actually technically is a down payment, but they structure it as a 0% interest loan. So they basically give you a loan for the down payment, and then they don't charge you interest on it. So that's the best of all worlds. There is a minimum credit score of 640 and a maximum income of 154.8. It is for any buyer in DC, not just first-time home buyers. They do have a maximum loan amount. It's DC only. And they have something called a maximum debt to income ratio, which means of all the debt that you have and the payments on that debt need to equal 50% of less of your gross income. And that's something the lender will help you figure out. It's basically a way of making sure you don't overextend yourself with debt. So the next one is another great one that we love. This is through Fannie Mae, which is one of those government entities who exists to promote homeownership. So they have something called a Journey Home Grant. So any lender that works with Fannie Mae loans has this grant available. It's up to $10,000, and you can use it for down payment or closing cost assistance. So it's not necessarily a zero down, but it is a 3% down program. So if you have 3%, you can do this and then use the $10,000 either to supplement your down payment or as closing cost assistance. So it's primary residence only. They do have some household income limits. You do not need to be a first-time home buyer. Any buyer can qualify for this. But it is specifically limited to low to moderate income census tracts. And the great thing about this is that you can use it with other programs. So if there's a lender-specific program that you want to take advantage of their credit, but they also do Fannie Mae loans, you can get both. So a lot of these other programs aren't like that. So that's the reason, one of the reasons we love this one, because 10,000 is a really generous grant, but you can also combine it with something else. So that's pretty great. Now this Federal Home Loan Bank one, this is one that I believe has the pool of funds. So you need to time it kind of carefully. But they provide up to $15,000 in home purchase assistance. You can use it for down payment or closing costs. But you need to contribute at least $1,000. It is income restricted. You do not need to be a first-time home buyer, but it is for your primary residence only, which most of them, frankly, do have that as a restriction. It's not; these are not for investment properties. Now, if you want to have a roommate and then you charge rent to that roommate, that's fine. That's still considered owner occupied and doesn't need to factor in to the calculation. But if it's a 2-unit, let's say it's a duplex and you're buying both units, then it gets a little tricky. So that's something you need to be careful about with the lenders. The great thing about this one is that it can cover renovation costs. But this is, because this is a community partners loan, it is targeting specific career choices: educators, law enforcement, and that can be current or retired, healthcare workers, and that's a pretty general pool, healthcare workers. So doctors, nurses, EMTs, firefighters, and other first responders, and then military and surviving spouses. So this is one that you might be able to do a VA loan, but then you could look at the VA loan and then through the Veterans Administration, but then compare it to something like this, where you could get $15,000 in cash. This might actually be the better choice. So you want to find a lender who can do both the VA loan and this community partners loan so that they can help you think through which one is the better option. Okay, now I'm getting into some lender specific loans. And if you're interested in one of these, just contact us and we'll connect you with the loan officer that we work with that can tell you in great detail what these are about and how they work. But our favorite one that we've had some clients use is called the Home Ready Credit. And this is $7,500 towards either down payment or closing costs. Any home buyer is eligible. You do not need to be a first-time home buyer. It is income restricted, but where this one gets interesting is that our lender has had a lot of success in getting someone, if it's a couple, that having them qualify for this credit using just one of the incomes, but then both buyers can be on the title to the property. So they are pretty flexible on how much you qualify for. So you might not need that second income. So we've had some buyers who had 2 incomes, but they didn't need both incomes to qualify. And so they took one person off of the loan so that they got this free $7,500. But this is limited to primary residences and only 1 unit. So no duplexes or anything like that. So this is also a different lender, but lender specific, called the Dream Plan Home program. And this is not quite as generous. It's $5,000. Income restricted again. And again, they have some ways that they can kind of make it work as long as you qualify with just 1 income, even if you're 2 people. It is location restricted, but nearly all of the DC area qualifies. So everybody that we've worked with in the last few years, they're in one of the areas that qualifies. You do not need to be a first-time home buyer. There is an online class that's required. I think there's a small fee for the class. It's like $75 or something. It might even be free. But there is a short online class that's required. Again, primary residences only. And then this $5,000 can be used to offset some of your closing costs, things like appraisal and other items. Okay. So now we're back at the high end of the range. This is a nice one, $12,500. This one is limited to first-time home buyers, only for your primary residence, income restricted. And this is one of those definitions. First-time home buyers is defined as cannot have owned a home anywhere in the previous 3 years. So pretty generous program. So $12,500 towards down payment or closing costs. So, if you're working with a lender and they have a 3% down program, but then you get this $12,500, it can help offset that 3% down payment. And then here's another one by a community group called Community Heroes, both current and retired teachers, police, firefighters, certain medical professionals, and healthcare workers. So a little bit different here. Like we had first responders on the other ones. I think we had some other category in the other one that we don't have here. This is down payment or closing costs. So it's great for anybody that needs help there. Okay, so that was just 7 or 8 or so. We literally have, I have probably 24 of these types of programs from all the lenders that we work with. So again, if you want to set up a 15 or 20-minute meeting with us, we're happy to listen and hear what you're looking for and then make the introduction to the lenders that might fit. And it might be more than one. There might be 2 or 3 lenders that you would need to go talk to. but we can certainly streamline the process for you a little bit. So once you talk to that lender, and then you have an idea of, okay, I'm going to go with this lender and this program, and this is the amount of cash I need, which I'll have, and that translates to a purchase price of X. That's when we come back together. So we want to make sure that buying is still the right answer for you, that you're going to stay there 3 or 4 years, and that you're going to get some of that return if you do buy. I'm not going to go into details about tax savings because honestly, tax savings are not as big as they used to be. And for a lot of first-time home buyers, especially if you're a single first-time home buyer, you might not get any tax savings at all. So I'm happy to have a call with anybody that wants to get into the nitty-gritty if you guys are numbers people, but for most people, it should not be part of your decision. So when you decide like, okay, based on what I can qualify for, I do want to buy. We certainly hope that you'll come back to us and give us a chance. We'd love to work with you. We are experienced with first-time home buyers. And so these are the things in this list here that if you're talking to us or whomever you're talking to, this is what you should be looking for. Experience with first-time homebuyers, full-time, experience in the number of transactions, price range, and location that you're looking in. And the number of transactions, I think, is really important because the more they see, and this is where teams really come into play, the more the agencies or the more the team sees, the better they're going to be at negotiating and structuring an offer and having those conversations with sellers and their agents, because they might be writing 100 offers a year, 200 offers a year. So they're seeing what's working and what's not. But when you, teams are the way of the future. I think most people will have a better experience with a team because they're going to see more, they're going to have more resources for you, and they're going to be able to help you more quickly and on shorter notice. You do want to talk through with the agent, well, how do you get paid? And is there any minimum commission that I would be on the hook for? And every agent is a little bit different here. Some have minimums and some don't. Generally, sellers will pay the buyer agent's commission. But it's important that you have that conversation though, because especially if you're in one of these programs where every penny matters and you're trying to get that down payment and closing cost help, you don't want to end up at the last minute on the hook for any commissions. And then talk to them about the buyer representation agreement, how that works, how long is it good for, what happens if things aren't working out and you want to work with someone else. So all of that should be part of your conversation when you're choosing an agent. Okay, so once you work with an agent, so what we like to do is talk upfront about the market conditions and your search criteria. So we start with that number that you worked out with the lender, and then we start talking about some of the trade-offs on that price point between condition and location. And we'll set up a search, and we do a lot of what if analysis to say, well, how many homes should we expect to come up in that area? Is it going to be a needle in a haystack, or are there going to be lots of choices every single week? So we can play with your search criteria a little bit so that we improve our chances of finding something great. Then we set up this search. You can go on tours with your agent. We do recommend that you see things as quickly as you can because the DC market does move pretty quickly. Things generally are going to sell in a week or so if it's priced correctly. So you can go on private tours with your agent. You can also go to open houses. If you know you're a year out and you just want to go to open houses and get a feel for different neighborhoods, that's great. You don't need an agent to go to open houses. Your agent will go with you if you want them to, but there's a sign-in sheet. You just sign in. They are supposed to ask you if you have an agent. I recommend that you say yes or put down us, because if you say you don't have an agent, then they're going to start calling you and emailing you because they want to be your agent. So if you want to avoid that, you can just put down us as your agent. So open houses are great. Tours with your agent are great. Once you find a place, we'll work with you to come up with the offer and do our due diligence period. So in the offer, we have things like the offer price, which contingencies we're going to have, things like home inspection or appraisal contingencies. Let's say the close date, what type of loan you're doing. So this is where we would say, hey, I'm doing the VHDA loan with 0% down. That goes into the offer. So that's why it's important that you have that figured out up front, because we have to tell them that this is what we're doing. Generally, there's maybe a couple days to a week of back and forth while that's finalized, but then you're under contract. Now, the close date is, in most cases, without one of these programs, it's usually about 30 days later, but we say in the offer what the date's going to be. And if you're using one of these programs, they often need more time. So it might be 60 days or even 90 days. We need to know that up front if you're using one of those, because if we put in, hey, we're going to close in 60 days, and the seller accepts that, but then it turns out the program needs 90 days, well, then that's a problem because we can't perform under the contract. We said we were going to do it in 60, and now we're coming back at the end and saying we need 90. So we need to know up front. The other disadvantage, unfortunately, of some of these programs is when they do need 90 days. If a seller is looking at two offers and one of them can close in 30 days, but you need 90 days, they're probably going to go with the one that can close more quickly. So that's why it's important that we, like, sometimes you need to know what the options are in the programs, because one might be the very best program, but they need 90 days. And something else might be almost as good, but they only need 45 days. So you might decide, well, let me go with the 45 days because the best program in the world doesn't matter if the seller is not going to accept my offer. Okay. So when you meet with the agent, we're going to do this search. We're going to talk about some of the trade-offs. We will talk about coming soon and some off-market things. There aren't as many as people think. People often think there's this secret database of all these listings. And believe me, I wish there were. There is a very small database of very few listings. Most sellers know that they're going to get the best price by going on the MLS and having all the buyers see it. So that's what most sellers do. When the market is hot, you should see the listings as soon as possible. That's what an agent's for. We set up a private appointment. Ideally, we do that on the first day it goes on market because speed does matter. And then just be careful when you're at an open house, or if you call the listing agent, which I don't recommend that you call them, or if you go to like a Redfin or Zillow and just set up an appointment with any agent, that agent doesn't work for you. They work for the seller. So they're not going to know about these loan programs. They're not going to be able to advise you on anything because by law, they work for the seller. When you have your own agent and a signed agreement, they work for you. So just be careful what you're saying and to whom. Let's see. I think I covered some of these, the offer period. So sellers are often looking for easy and fast transactions. So that's something we need to consider when we're deciding which grant program to use. The agent will help you figure out a price range that's reasonable for that sale so that we can make a competitive offer. They're also going to help you write your contingencies. So the price, the terms, and then these contingencies, the inspections and things like that. So settlement. So who pays the closing costs is negotiable. So these programs are great. You can get some free money towards closing costs. But there's also the possibility of asking the seller to pay some of the closing costs, especially if a unit has been on the market for 30 days or more, then you can often get the seller to pay some of the closing costs. So if you have a down payment and you just need a little bit of cash for the closing costs, you might not need one of these programs at all. You might be able to write it with a regular 3% down loan and ask the seller to pay the closing costs. And then you can close quickly, like 30 days. But if you're going to be using one of these grants or assistance programs, you need to allow extra time. The lender, in addition, they're going to give you this estimate up front, the closing disclosure, but they will also give you something called a closing disclosure that you need to sign 3 days prior to settlement, sometimes even earlier, but it can't be less than 3 days prior to closing. And that details the exact amount you need to bring to closing. So there's not going to be any surprises. Now, a good lender is going to be giving you estimates all along the way so that there won't be any surprises. But this document comes 3 days before closing, and then that's when you start to shift money around. So you might need a small deposit at the time you write the offer. Generally, it's somewhere between 2 and 3% of the offer price. But the rest of the down payment and the closing costs you don't need until settlement. And then the occupancy date is set by the contract, but it might include a rent back. Often sellers, if they're still living in the property, they might want to stay in the property for another 30 or 45 or 60 days so that they have your money to go buy their next house. So that's very common, especially in the spring. Now, if you're buying a place that's vacant, that's not going to be an issue. You're just going to be able to take possession on the day of closing. but otherwise it becomes part of the contract negotiation at the beginning of the process. So all of these things go into the offer, which is quite long, as you can imagine, because we're negotiating all of these things up front. Okay, so one last plug here for feedback and our information here. So you can reach out to me directly if you'd like. You can also contact us through our website or on social, through DMs or comments. So please give us a follow. Please go give us some feedback. Let's check the chat here and see. I see we have a couple of questions. How is credit score determined if you're applying with your spouse? They are going to check both credit scores. Now, if one spouse has a much higher credit score and the other one has a very low credit score, it's possible that they might only use the one income. If it's the one with the high credit score, you might actually qualify for more not using the other spouse. So it really just depends, but they are going to check both. Received your latest newsletter. Thanks. Yes, if we have a newsletter every month. So if people want that, again, you can just put that in your feedback form or reach out to us. We're happy to add you. We just sent it out this week. When do we predict an uptick, more homes for sale? Not for a very long time. So unfortunately, this low inventory that we've been in this area, this has been a problem going back more than 10 years. And if you've attended, and I can pull up the inventory charts from our new homebuyer class to show you the history. But we have had this inventory problem ever since 2010, which was kind of the crash. When we had the real estate crash back in, I think the bottom was around 2008, 2009. That was when the last time that we had high inventory, and it has been a steadily downward trajectory since then. The only things that make the inventory go up would be a mass exodus from the area. So a lot of people leaving DC for some reason. And there was a lot of speculation that maybe with new remote work policies that was going to happen, but it did not play out that way. So some mass exodus from the area would make a lot of inventory available for sale. Some incredible new burst of building. And the challenge with that is that most of the new construction that's happening is condos. So we would see an uptick in condos available for sale, but not townhouses and single family homes. Generally, the new construction in those segments, single family detached homes in particular, it's through tear downs. So we're not really increasing the number of homes for sale. Instead, what we're doing is trading a low priced home for a very, very high priced home. So unfortunately, I don't see an end in sight to this inventory shortage, which is why we encourage people to kind of be realistic about what you can get and get into the market. It's going to be easier to trade up than to wait for the inventory to come. Okay, once you've been pre-approved, what are things you should be aware of in terms of moving money around in accounts? So the lender is going to ask for 2 months of bank statements throughout the process. So when you get pre-approved, and then again the month before closing, because they need to re-verify everything. So any big deposits in and out or anything unusual, like they might be able to see your paycheck coming in every 2 weeks, and that's fine. But if you have a big deposit that's $10,000, they're going to ask you, what was that? Where did it come from? And because what they're worried about is that you went out and borrowed $10,000 from a friend or from a parent, that now that counts as debt. So it's fine to do the everyday things and moving money around. Just be aware that anything that's large, you're going to have to explain. You can, by the way, get a gift, and that's fine. The lender will ask you for what's called a gift letter, which will be a letter from the gift giver saying, I don't expect this to be repaid. It was a gift. And that gets a little tricky. Sometimes parents and grandparents say, well, it's not a gift. I do want you to repay me. And you guys can have a side agreement, but for purposes of your loan, it has to technically be a gift without expectation of repayment. All right, can share insight about being strategic while going through the homebuyer process while under a lease for 3 to 6 months. Actually, I don't think you need to be very strategic. If you've got 3 to 6 months left on a lease, you need to be looking now. Most homebuyers that we work with take at least 3 to 6 months to find something. By the time they talk to a lender, they get familiar with locations, because whatever, don't forget, like whatever you find, you might find the one and 5 other buyers might have also decided it's the one for them too. So we might not necessarily get it on the first try. So 3 months goes by like that. And don't forget, there's a month to 2 months in between contract and close. So let's say you talk to a lender, you meet with us, that takes about a month to get that all in order and get your search set up. Then it might take us a month or so to find a place and make an offer. Then it takes another month to get from contract to close. So 3 months is like, we need to start right now. 6 months, you have a little bit of breathing room. But the other thing to keep in mind is the inventory levels. So depending on what you're looking for, it may or may not be available right now. Or maybe it's very likely to be available in April, May, and June, but then they kind of disappear. So we see that a lot with detached homes and townhouses where people are moving there for the school district and for kids. So then the inventory drops off because everybody's trying to time it with the school year. We don't see that as much with condos. They tend to be a little more level throughout the year. But it's definitely worth a conversation. Can it happen in less than 3 months? Absolutely. We do have it happen in less than 3 months. But we also have people work with us for 12 months or 18 months. And that's fine. We'd rather have more time than we need than less. But if you're motivated and we know what we're looking for, it can happen faster. Okay. Oh, nice overview and pointers. Thank you. Bit longer class. I know an hour just seems to, it goes by quickly, but I know people's, it's late at night and it's a long day for everybody. But I appreciate the kind words. Thank you. So yeah, if anybody, I think that's all the questions. If you have this link, please give us some feedback. Go ahead and request the slides. We'll get them out to you. Feel free to request a 15-minute follow-up call, and we'll talk to you about some of the other programs that we've come across. So thank you everybody so much for joining us tonight, and we hope to work with you soon.